We're going to talk a little bit about drafting, how drafting affects our yarn, the different times that you would want to use the different drafting techniques, and ways to stretch yourself so that you can spin the yarn that you want. Let's get spinning. Drafting is how we are actually attenuating out the fiber and what we're doing with it between here and when it's going onto the wheel. So yesterday we talked about fiber prep. We talked about top versus roving, and I would like to talk about drafting today. We're going to start out with worsted yarn. And in order to make a worsted yarn, we're going to take out all of the air. So in order to do that, I'm going to be drafting forward, and then you're going to see my hands move over the yarn. And what I'm doing is I'm taking out all of that air and squashing it down. I'm stopping my hands right at the tip of the drafting triangle so that I know I'm only holding the same number of fibers that I have in front of my hand. So we're going to be doing forward, taking the air out, forward, taking the air out. Now, one of the things that's very, very subtle that I spent years spinning and no one ever mentioned to me, and I didn't do it intuitively, but when you're holding the fiber right here between your fingers, when you go to do the next part of the drafting, which is going to be pulling the fiber out, you can actually use little microscopic movements of rolling the yarn to make it easier to draft. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. And you see me rolling with my thumb. It's making that drafting just that much easier. So the other thing to remember is that sometimes you'll see articles and someone will say, I spun this semi-worsted. And that means that it's always semi by the prep, meaning that if it's semi-worsted, it's because the prep was combed. And then you can spin it woolen, which we're going to talk about next, but it would still be a semi-worsted yarn. And the same applies for a semi-woolen. A semi-woolen would be a yarn that we spun from our roving and used this same technique of worsted spinning. We discussed short forward draw. You can also do a backwards draw as long as your hands are squishing out all that air. Now we're going to talk about woolen spinning. Woolen spinning, I'm going to use my roll log that I prepared yesterday and get going here. And one of the things that you're going to see is on my forward hand, I'm using that same little microscopic rolling back and forth, and I'm opening my fingers just slightly to allow the twist to come in behind my hand. Now you'll notice that right here at the drafting triangle, I am leaving all that air in for that much loftier, softer yarn, much lighter weight. So I'm opening my hand in the front and allowing the air to be trapped in the yarn. Drafting techniques are a really good way to get away from your default yarn. If you've always mainly used a short forward draw, try some woolen spinning with a little bit of a long draw. So a long draw you will just be allowing that twist to go back further and further into the yarn that you're spinning. You can see that I have some bumps, and I'm okay with that. You have to apply each spinning technique for whatever project that you want to work on. If you're a new spinner and you're having a hard time with drafting, chances are the first thing that I would tell you is that your hands are probably too close together. So even with a short forward draw, you need to make sure that your hands are further apart than the staple length of your fiber. And the staple length of your fiber, if you're not aware, is if you take the end of your commercial braid and you hold it in the flat part of your hand and you pull it out, you now know that if you are pulling or trying to draft any closer than this, then you will be pulling on two ends of the same fiber. So a lot of times, if it feels like it's really hard to draft the fiber that you're using, try to put your hands a little bit further apart. I also have had people who are newer to spinning or have their default is a little bit thicker yarn than they would like to use. And a great way to try to make your yarn a little bit skinnier is you load up your hand card and you get it all prepped and you have this nice little fraggly kind of looks like one of those trolls. You start to spin and we're just going to connect the fiber here and we're going to draft straight off the card. One of the things that's really great about this technique is that you can't hold the fiber too tightly in your fiber hand because it's on the card. And so this is another great way to bring down that diameter of your yarn just by grabbing very, very small bits of fiber off the tip. So that's one of my really fun ways. And you get a really good, even, and consistent yarn with that technique. The other technique that I really like, and this is another great one if your hands feel like they're having a hard time drafting, and we talked about pulling out the staple length. You'll pull off the staple length and do that just a couple times. Then we're going to do it over the fold. So you place the fiber around your index finger about midway. And I'm going to hold it with my thumb. You start your wheel spinning. And I usually like to leave about 1 inch. And I hold that over the tip of my finger. And pretty soon you will see that it just connects onto the fiber like magic. Now, when I'm spinning, I'm actually spinning folded fibers. So if you can see from my hand, and you just will work your way all the way down the length of your fiber. And that's another one that's really great for getting your yarn a little bit skinnier. And that brings us to a close. Thank you for joining us in the spin along for Spinning and Weaving Week 2020.